the ongoing fallout and postmortem on Tucker Carlson's firing from Fox News. By the way, they happen in threes. And they say media firings happen in threes. Isn't that the cliche?
Well, and deaths of celebrities happen in threes.
Yeah, I got
well,
it.
yeah, you know that.
So
We got Tucker, Don.
Yeah. And 538 founder Nate Silver, he got cut by ABC News.
Really?
Yeah, Disney's got to cut costs. The popular pollster, apparently not popular enough. Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are our three.
Yeah, all right. So
then we start again when you get cut for Paul Vallis.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a rumor going around.
Yeah, the Chicago press corps about as enlightened and diligent as the DC press corps.
Hey.
For more on Tucker's departure, per his piece, no one did this to Tucker. Well, I mean, yeah, Rupert Murdoch did it. I mean, somebody did it. He didn't fire himself. Pleased to be joined by our friend Noah Rothman, senior writer at National Review, author of The Rise of the New Puritans, Fighting Back Against Progressives' War on Fun. Noah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So what do you mean when you, I mean, I read the piece, but you explained it. What do you mean when you say no one did this to Tucker?
Well, I mean that this is the notion here is being bandied about that this is somehow undeserved, unmerited, an attack on Tucker Carlson, who is a very talented broadcaster, but who is also engaged in irresponsible broadcasting, who has implied through his reporting that the January 6th riots were something of a plant, insinuated, without directly stating it, that one of these individuals was on the FBI payroll. This is defamatory. It's the sort of thing that you can actually be sued over. And Fox News has 787 million reasons to be leery about that sort of conduct. Add on top of that defamation suits that occurred in 2020, this upcoming sexual assault suit, or sexual harassment suit, the merits thereof, who knows. But it's just death by 1,000 cuts. At a certain point, Murdoch has established a record of cut and bait on stuff that's even profitable. News of the World, for example, this British tabloid that was engaged in a ball hacking scandal in the beginning of the 2010s, was a profitable enterprise when it was scuttled, dismantled, and everyone was fired, simply because it had become a liability. Tucker was one of the primary profit drivers of this enterprise. He'd also become a liability. And as such, he was let go. I don't know if you saw this reporting last night from Gabriel Sherman. Did you see this? Gabe Sherman in the Vanity Fair suggesting that Tucker was let go summarily following a fit of pique among the Murdoch family after he had suggested that it was worthwhile for you to engage in 10 minutes of prayer per day, and that he's being persecuted for this. I can't think of a more nonsensical explanation for this guy's dismissal. Pete Hegseth literally worships on weekends on Fox and Friends Friday. Ainsley Earhart leads a Bible study group on Fox Nation. It's just nonsensical reporting from an established liberal reporter, but the desire to have some sort of a victimization narrative to attach to Tucker here is very strong.
Well, what kind of a role did the text messages play in the Trump, or in the Dominion suit, where Trump's lawyer, Sidney Powell, Tucker Carlson, made some unflattering remarks? He said she's a blank and blank, a psychopath, a liar, and blank blank.
Well, I don't know the extent to which that played any sort of role, and certainly Tucker's name is all over those documents, but he's not the foremost offender. We have names like Maria Bartiromo and Lou Dobbs, who played a much more prominent role. But Lou Dobbs is gone. So the notion here that this is entirely unprecedented and has no relation to the documents that were discovered in the lawsuit over Dominion voting systems seems unlikely. It's probably a contributing factor.
Well, I mean, but the fact that he said Sidney Powell was all hat and no cattle, no uncertain terms, both in text messages and on his show, would sort of cut against the idea that he was part of any group that was purposely reporting things that they knew to be untrue, meeting the actual malice standard. Because he was essentially suggesting what Sidney Powell was saying about the 2020 election she couldn't prove up and there was no evidence there. So that's the Dominion position. So that doesn't make any sense.
Well, if you were to rest your argument on the actual malice standard before a court, I think you'd be on firm ground there. But because this didn't reach a court, we are adjudicating this on standards outside the law. We're adjudicating this on the standards that are established in the court of public opinion and just best practices for business. If you were to contend that Tucker Carlson spent the majority of the time since the 2020 election disabusing his viewers of the notion that there was voting fraud in that election and the election was conducted fairly accurately and Joe Biden was legitimate president, I don't think you have leg to stand on there.
Well, yeah. The text. I mean, I'm talking about specific evidence that comes out in discovery that is essentially exculpatory. So, other things he may have said. You're allowed to say things. You're allowed to offer opinions based on what you've heard, based on what you know. I mean, we're talking about the public official standard.
But you're also you're also citing the discovery in the process of this particular trial, and the judge issued a summary dismissal in March of the notion that this conduct constituted fair opinion or neutral reporting privilege. That was just summarily dismissed.
Yeah, but he didn't. So we never got to actual malice. And by the way, not to mention, just speaking since it wasn't adjudicated, that's an appealable ruling too that judge made, and I think a dubious one, not just with respect to Tucker Carlson, but even with respect to text messages that David Harsanyi has written about, among others, with Maria Bartiromo and Steve Bannon, where it was like, I hope you have something. Do you have anything? And so on and so forth. That's not the same thing as saying, I have concluded X, Y, or Z when you're talking to a Trump campaign official and saying, do you have something? Is something coming? I hope you have something, and so on and so forth. You're allowed to be a cheerleader, as we see on all these cable news networks.
You're quite right. This is an appealable ruling, which begs the question. I mean,
why did he settle?
Appeal it.
Why did they settle?
For one of the largest sums of a settle that we know, it's not often disclosed, but this was disclosed by Dominion, as one of the largest settlements of this sort in probably in legal history. So why?
Well, I agree. It's baffling to me, especially when you have a company that has $100 million in annual revenue and $800 million. How can that be justified as economic damages? Even if you included a punitive kicker, you don't get to $800 million. So, I mean, it's a wild number, and I don't, to be honest, I don't understand, other than to some extent what you're saying, which is more lawsuits are coming, so we're going to clean house as some sort of show of good faith to those who are knocking at our door because we have deep pockets. But the problem with that is,
yeah.
Well, you could have shareholder suits the other way too, where investors say, I don't understand that settlement, and it can cut in a lot of different directions. But my point is to say, cleaning house and so forth, that doesn't do anything to indemnify you against suits that are going to be related to allegations from now previous hosts. It's just sort of a go forward. So I think people and I'm not saying you're doing, but I think people are conflating that. Doesn't mean that somebody can sue Fox for something Tucker said and whistle Tucker back in if they survive a motion to dismiss and discovery and deposition and so on and so forth. So it doesn't indemnify them from the Smartmatic suits or anything else, the sexual harassment suit you mentioned, anything else that's pending against Fox.
No, it certainly doesn't. But it might go some way to satisfying perhaps some of the apprehension among those for whom Fox has a fiduciary responsibility to. And I think that's probably the only answer that makes any sense.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I mean, pull back and with respect to conservative media generally, I mean, give us since you're a part of it, give us your view on where conservative media is these days, and what you like and what you don't like.
That's such a broad question. There's certainly more, I think. I mean, it depends on who you're talking about.
Well,
and it depends on the venue you're talking about. When it comes to, we're talking specifically about Fox News right now. Fox News has cultivated a particular audience in prime time that is very responsive to the sort of broadcasting that Tucker Carlson did, which was not Republican broadcasting. I don't even think you could call it conservative broadcasting, honestly, particularly given the hostility that he meted out to party dynamics, to coalition dynamics, to even conservative philosophy as we understood it in the years preceding Donald Trump's ascension to the presidency. But is that the Fox audience? I don't know, and I frankly don't think so. The notion here that when you see the people who are really energized, enthused on the ground in defense of Tucker Carlson, they skew younger, they skew more male, and they don't reflect the demographics that make up the 3 million people who tune in every night at 8 p.m. to Fox News, which are older, which are actually more they're male, but less dramatically male. It's actually a pretty good breakdown between male and female. And that audience isn't going anywhere. And that's what Fox has understood, that the real estate is always more important than the person who temporarily occupies it.
Yeah, but there's some people that are not going to watch Fox ever again because they're so upset, and then their stock drop. But what's next for Tucker Carlson? Where's he going to go? Because older people don't really download podcasts, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, they're late adopters, but that's not necessarily the case. But the conservative media. So I'm obviously, look, I like the New Criterion, and I like Touchstone magazine, and I like a lot of other niche publications. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the big players. So I'm talking about the Fox Newses and the Daily Wires and the people that have bank and audience. And what I'm saying is, what kind of comment is that on conservative media and the state of conservative media in your view?
Well, the biggest conflict in intra-conservative media is not really over substance. It is tonal. It is about affect and a particular pugnacity that you bring to the conversation. It's all about approach. Is the approach adopting and assuming a prickly demeanor that will countenance no concessions to political realities, that is expressly hostile and is dogged in defense of its particular interests, and not really all that afraid to malign and defame? Or do you assume a much more deferential demeanor in espousing views that you hope to convey to the public in a way that convinces persuadables, that actually appeals to people who are otherwise not on the team? That is the big primary driver of conflict within the conservative media environment right now, has been for years. Tucker Carlson landed squarely on one side of that debate. I am on the other. And in that sense, the two of us are in conflict. I do find persuasion to be the more effective and productive approach to advancing my views. Others disagree. They find it to be capitulatory. But that is the conflict that is raging right now. And Tucker Carlson is not going to be absent from that conflict for very long. I suspect he'll be more influential in the short term than he was at Fox News. But in order to be more influential in the long term, he's going to have to be very industrious. He's capable of that. He's built his own venues before. Yeah. But I don't know whether he has the stomach for it now.
Yeah. What you're describing is the tonal conflict, and I generally agree with that. Does that go in only one direction though? Because the way I hear the David Frenches and the Jonah Goldbergs talk about the penchant for defamatory content or maligning of fellow conservatives, I see that going in both directions. But what I hear from formerly friends of the show, I mean, still have them on if they want to come on, but people like I just mentioned, I think are two good examples of people on your side, but engage in some of the same maligning that you're suggesting comes from the MAGA side.
I'm not sure if I understand the charge. I mean, if you don't reserve any decorum and deference for your interlocutor, you shouldn't expect any in return.
Right. But I agree with that in principle. So, but I guess my question is,
the notion here, I mean,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but are there those at the Bulwark, for example, or other outlets, with other portals that promote conservative thought generally, that have a malignant attitude towards Trump supporters, even Trump supporters as a matter of transaction, not as a matter of principle?
Well, it's a case-by-case basis, and I'd have to evaluate the cases themselves. But there's a misapprehension among those who are on the side of the debate, that on this tonal side of the debate that I am not, that their opponents on my side who seek to persuade never engage in any pugnacious displays at all, never defend their views doggedly, adamantly, and will always defer and be constantly rolled over. And then act indignantly and kind of offended when that doesn't happen to them. When they malign, insult, and defame, and then get it back in kind and say, wait. I thought you were something different. Well, maybe the misapprehension is on your side. Maybe the misapprehension is on your part, that you think that these people never fought for their views ever once and really don't hold fast to them very much at all. And they could be pushed and cajoled and they're malleable, right? But it turns out they're not. So maybe the misapprehension is on your part.
Well, maybe, or maybe as Victor Davis Hanson said, a lot of people took a financial hit when Trump got elected because they were on the wrong side of that, and they're not too happy about it. And when I see Jonah Goldberg singing for his supper on CNN, that commentary from VDH certainly comes to mind. But
hey, listen, I was on MSNBC for a long time, and it was good to me. But what did I do on MSNBC? I fought. All I did was fight. And that was good television. And frankly, that is good television. But you got to be pugnacious to the right people. And yes, in espousing your views, as I do, I find it not that hard to engage in the same sort of political combat with people I disagree with on the left as I do with people on the right. It doesn't seem to me to be very much of a difference. This is not I don't get a cut of the action when conservatives win elections or don't win elections. This isn't really something that butters my bread here. It is generally just the advancement of ideas and the advancement of a particular style of thought leadership that I think is beneficial to the future of this country and the conservative movement. That's what I get out of it. Really it.
All right. He is Noah Rothman, senior writer at National Review, author of The Rise of the New Puritans, Fighting Back Against Progressives' War on Fun. Noah, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Last June, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, many Americans celebrated. Less than a year later, a federal judge halted the